Hi, self-healers. Happy Saturday. I don't know if anybody will be on their Instagram right now because it's 1 p.m. on a Saturday, but I figured, what the heck? I wanted to make some videos and I started making a whole series of videos on muscle testing, and my memory card was full. So every like 2 minutes my camera would cut off, and then I had to go and like delete some stuff, and I just realized like I'm gonna need a new memory card because I'm not good at deleting things. And actually my brother got me this cool like webcam thing for Christmas. So I'm gonna try and figure out how to use that on my computer so I can just cut out the whole like camera middleman. But I read somewhere that you can actually save live video, so I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna try and do a live video and then I'm gonna try and save it. So this video is about muscle testing because I have gotten a couple of questions lately, and I just realized that, maybe people don't fully know what its application is and why I recommend using it. So I wanted to explain a little bit of that. So I want to start by talking about, I guess, what muscle testing is. So muscle testing is a huge part of the self-healer program and really all of my programs, but more so than any of the others, the self-healer program. And it is a way to gauge your body's kinetic response. So your body has a frequency. My hair is like driving me crazy. I'm so sorry. Your body has a frequency. Everything on the planet has a frequency. Because our brains and our hearts and our whole bodies are electrical, we can actually get, we can actually get a neurolinguistic reading from our muscles, because our muscles can kind of conduct that electrical energy. So with muscle testing, what you're looking for is a slight difference. So a slight change in the kinetic response of your body. It's a way to gauge something neurological by using your muscles as a vehicle, basically. So I've made some videos before on how to muscle test, and you can have it done by a practitioner, but it's not going to be as, I believe, as effective as doing it to yourself. So I recommend people learn how to muscle test themselves, and it does take a lot of practice, and it does take a really deep understanding of how to do it, but it is potentially a lot less subjective than having a practitioner do it, because one of the biggest limitations of muscle testing is how good the practitioner is. So I've had really good practitioners and I've had really bad practitioners, and I've even had practitioners purposefully skew the answer to a muscle test, and I'll get into that, but that was really traumatic to say the least. You just have to, I'll explain it. You just have to understand what went on to understand like how awful it was. So this is a little bit of a charged topic for me because muscle testing has helped me self-heal from lupus, from mold illness, from parasites, I don't know what else, all kinds of things this past year. Things that don't necessarily have good quantitative tests to determine what's going on, because I had all of the quantitative Western medicine tests and nothing showed the things that muscle testing showed. And after doing treatments that muscle testing showed would be pro-survival to my biology, I was able to heal. So I have a lot of personal experience with it in a good way, but then I have a lot of personal experience with it in a bad way from practitioners that either had no idea what they were doing, didn't really understand my frequency well enough, or practitioners that had an ulterior motive, which sounds super like alarmist, but I'll explain and you'll understand, trust me. So I want to talk about what muscle testing is not. So muscle testing is not objective. It is a highly subjective measure. Does that render it useless? Absolutely not. But it has limitations. Everything has limitations. If you know anything about doing actual research in a lab, then you understand everything has limitations. As long as you're a good steward of those limitations and you're not trying to apply a meaning to something that it can't actually confer, then you can use it practically. So you just have to be aware of the limitations. So the number one limitation is that it is subjective. It is not an objective measure. There is a margin of error based on operator error, the practitioner, yourself, whoever's doing the actual testing. There is a margin of error there. So it is subjective. It will be different from person to person, and you have to keep that in mind. So number two is that it's not quantitative. So if you get a lab test done or you prick your finger and check your blood glucose level, that's quantitative because it gives you a number. Muscle testing can't do that. Muscle testing can only give you a yes or no response. So you have to do a lot of additional investigating, and there are some things that muscle testing isn't going to provide really any information on. Muscle testing is not intended for diagnostic purposes. So muscle testing is a screening measure. Muscle testing can tell you what direction to look in. It can tell you what you might want to investigate further. It can tell you maybe you want to have a quantitative, objective blood, urine, stool, hair test done if those things exist. So that's part of why muscle testing has practical utility, is because we don't always have a quantitative, objective lab test to test for some things. Oh, thank you. Hey guys, I appreciate the love. I have notes here. So muscle testing bridges that gap. It can give you a real-time perspective on something that you may not be able to test in any other way. So let's take the example of like what food you should eat in that moment. So what we're doing on a daily basis is just guessing. We're making an educated guess based on the science that's out there. So the science that we've read is oftentimes conflicting, and we're just making a guess. So we might be basing that guess on our genetics, or we might be basing that guess on what PubMed has published studies for. So those are lines of evidence, and that's what we're basing our decision about what we're going to eat on. So muscle testing provides an additional line of evidence. It's not intended to be the only line of evidence that you use in making your health decisions, and it should definitely not be the only line of evidence used in self-diagnosing or for a doctor giving you a diagnosis. So those are the things that muscle testing is not. Muscle testing is not subjective, it's not quantitative, it is not diagnostic, and it is not intended to be the only line of evidence you use in making health decisions. So now I want to talk about what muscle testing is. Muscle testing is an additional line of evidence. It is something that can tell you real time, maybe you should think about this. You know, it is something that can tell you yes or no to a particular frequency. So it can tell you yes or no to a particular food or a particular supplement. But because you shouldn't be using it for diagnostic purposes or as your sole line of evidence for making a decision, you have to consider other lines of evidence. So the four primary additional lines of evidence that you would consider, let's take the example of food. Hey, how's it going? So the other four lines of evidence that you should consider with a food would be the form, So if you got a yes or no response from muscle testing, okay, that's your screening. That's one line of evidence. So if you got a no, then what form was that food in? Let's say, for instance, it was spinach. So did you muscle test no to raw spinach? Okay, well, change the form. So you lightly steam it and you muscle test again. So you get a yes. Okay, so that's another line of evidence. Now I know that the form is something that changes my response to the food. So then you look to a third line of evidence as it relates to the form. So you would go into PubMed or Google or whatever reputable sources you can find on the internet to point you in a direction as to what is different between raw and steamed spinach. So you find that out, and the answer may be that steaming it reduces the amount of lectins, or steaming it reduces the amount of oxalate. So then you can go into PubMed and you can search about the effects of eating a high oxalate food or a high oxalate diet or a high lectin diet. And what you'll find is actual peer-reviewed evidence that maybe you shouldn't be eating high lectin foods, or maybe you shouldn't be eating high oxalate foods. So that's a line of evidence. So you consider all of those things together. So you consider the fact that you got a negative muscle test. Your body said, no, don't eat this raw spinach. You consider the fact that you steamed it and you got a yes muscle testing response. You consider the fact that PubMed says that steaming spinach decreases the lectins by this percentage. Then you consider the fact that there was a study in PubMed that said high levels of lectins in food actually cause this, and this negative response for some humans. So now you have this whole body of evidence just based off of whether or not you're going to eat that spinach raw or steamed. And muscle testing provided the screening. So muscle testing provided that initial, no, you need to look into this further. And then you added all this other evidence to really figure out what you should be eating. A food sensitivity test is not going to tell you that. If you have a food sensitivity test and it tells you that, you are creating antibodies to spinach, it's not going to tell you that it's raw spinach. You're going to have to do some further investigating. So can a food sensitivity test be a line of evidence? Yes, but you should never base any health decision on one line of evidence. And all evidence has limitations. So you really have to understand that yes, muscle testing has limitations, but all evidence has limitations. If you've ever done any clinical research, you know that every single paper has a section for limitations. If you're ignoring the limitations, then you're practicing quackery. You have to implement these things safely and consciously. And can Western medicine overlook limitations and present a test as infallible? Yes, it is not something that is just exclusive to holistic approaches to healing. You have to, with every single thing that you use to make your health decisions, you have to consider that it can't be just one thing, and you have to consider that everything has limitations. Therefore, you can't just use one thing. So muscle testing has great application as a screening tool, as a way to understand your body better, and it has a really good application as one of those lines of evidence. So another line of evidence that you would look into, let's say if you got let me look at my notes because I want to give you a good example. Okay, combinations. So another thing that you would investigate would be combinations. Let's say you muscle test yourself to MCT oil because you want to put MCT oil in your coffee. So what if you get a no response to MCT oil? Well, hey, thank you. Well, you would combine it with something else to see if the combination would make it pro-survival to your biology. So you could combine it with butter, because maybe you're going to put butter in your coffee anyway. You should be testing the whole thing, the whole combination, because that's what your body is perceiving. Your body's perceiving the whole combination, not just one thing by itself. So you would add butter. Let's say you have butter and MCT oil between your hands. You muscle test to that. Maybe you get a yes. So then you investigate, well, why would butter affect my response? And doing MCT oil alone would be a no. So you have to investigate. You have to create another line of evidence to support whether or not you're going to put butter in your coffee with MCT oil or use MCT oil alone or not at all. Another combination you could do would be digestive enzymes. So maybe you make the butter coffee with the MCT oil and the butter and you muscle test to it and you get a no. So you could take a capsule of hydrochloric acid, betaine hydrochloric acid with pepsin, and add it and muscle test again. Maybe you get a yes. Maybe you needed some extra stomach acid to digest all of that fat. And you can do that with all kinds of digestive enzymes. You can do that with all kinds of spices, herbs, nutrients. You can add cinnamon to your coffee. Maybe cinnamon gave you a yes when plain coffee gave you a no. So combinations would be another line of investigation that you need to do. But muscle testing, again, was the initial screening that provided you with that insight that maybe there's something more here. So what you come up with in your investigation is additional lines of evidence. Then you make your decision based off of those, because everything has limitations and there's no objective real-time test to tell you what you should be eating in that moment or how you should prepare it. So another line of investigation you could do, hang on, I want to get it right, would be, okay, the timing. That's a great one. So are you muscle testing to something on an empty stomach? Did you just wake up? Are you breaking a fast? Did you just work out? Are you about to work out? These are all things that will affect how your body perceives nutrients. So you can do this with your supplements as well. Supplement timing is such an interesting thing to investigate with muscle testing. And again, muscle testing is just the screening. So if you don't respond well to something that's really high in prebiotic fiber when you first wake up on an empty stomach, test it again after you work out, because working out will change the way that your gut bacteria perceive certain prebiotic fibers. So let's say you were going to eat this Quest bar first thing in the morning. You muscle tested, your body said no. And then you work out and your body said yes. Investigate that. You'll find that there are several reasons, because there are so many ingredients in a Quest bar. So it could be that the form of protein in that Quest bar was counter survival to you on an empty stomach when you first woke up. But after you worked out, that form of protein was pro-survival to you. And it may be the prebiotic fiber. It could be that that particular type of prebiotic fiber would have, given you gas or something first thing in the morning, but after you work out, it doesn't. And those are actual examples. Those are actual things that you can find in PubMed, things that you can find research on. So you're building this case as you go along with everything that you muscle test for. You're building this case for whether or not you think there's enough evidence to do or not do something. So that's the practical application of muscle testing. It really bridges the gap between what we need to know about our own biology and what we can test for with objective quantitative lab tests. So you can prick your finger and check for fasting blood glucose, or you could prick your finger and test for beta hydroxybutyrate if you're in ketosis. And those things will tell you real-time, objective, quantitative data. But we don't have that for determining what food you should eat or what supplement you should take in that moment. So what we would do in the absence of muscle testing is make a guess. We would make a guess based on what we found basically on the internet. Or if you've had some education in health sciences, you would make a decision based on what you learned in class. Or, you would make a decision based on what a friend said worked for them, or you would make a decision based on what your doctor told you to do or your nutritionist told you to do. But the fact of the matter is that has nothing to do with whether or not it's actually going to be good for you. So this just gives you an extra way of figuring that out. It gives you an extra piece of evidence to consider. So if you want to learn how to muscle test yourself, you have to understand all of these things. You have to understand that because it is subjective, you have to be in the right mindset to do it. You have to put aside your subjectivity. So I give my self-healers exercises to kind of do like guided meditation or visualization to, visualize putting their subjectivity into a box and closing it. A friend of mine told me about that. That's how she prepares to muscle test. You can tap your thymus to, balance your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Because if you're too sympathetic nervous system dominant, that will affect the test. I mean, it is a very sensitive screening tool. So if you want to learn how to use this tool for yourself, you have to understand, one, the limitations to it, and two, how to decrease some of the subjectivity, and three, how to investigate other lines of evidence so that you have more than one thing to consider. So you don't want to just consider muscle testing, you want to consider the science behind the muscle testing response that you got. And so I promised at the beginning that I would tell you a story about how I actually had a really traumatic experience with a practitioner that was using muscle testing the wrong way. So this practitioner was pretty unskilled. She was just kind of like a technician, and she was muscle testing people to determine what food sensitivities they had, and then she was administering a kind of holistic treatment to treat food sensitivities, and this was based on the meridians of your body. So I went into this pretty skeptical, because it's not that I didn't believe in muscle testing, it's just that I had a lot of practitioners give me guidance based on muscle testing that I believed was faulty advice. So I went into this already kind of like, well, we'll see. So what happened was that this practitioner had gotten my patient file mixed up with another patient's, and she tried to tell me that she had muscle tested me the week prior and already had in my file all of the foods that she muscle tested me to that I was sensitive to, and so she was just going to go ahead and start treatment. And I could not make her understand that there was no way she had tested me, that it had to have been someone else or she had to be confused. And she insisted, this is your file, the results are in your file, I already muscle tested you, you just don't remember. And I would have remembered that. I had never met her, I'd never been in her office. So she got the office manager to come in, and they teamed up on me and bullied me, and I was crying. I was bawling my eyes out because they were telling me that muscle testing is objective and that I just didn't remember being in there a week earlier, that people in their office, their patients usually have memory problems, and that I just had lost this 30 minutes of time only a week prior. And I was freaking out. I was already really sick. This was at the beginning of last year's healing journey, last October. So I was really sick and I was freaking out. I was like, I've lost my mind. I don't remember what happened a week ago. How would I not remember this? I've gone insane. And then I after a while, I realized that there was something wrong with the situation. They're trying to tell me that muscle testing is objective, and there's no way that it can be objective. There's just no way. So she said, well, I'll retest you, and if I get the same answers, then we'll know. And I said, you've already seen the results that you thought you got, so how is that objective? If you've already seen what results you think I have, you're going to muscle test me and tell me that if you get the same results, then you were right? So she did, and she was literally forcing my arm down for the ones that she wanted me to respond yes to. And muscle testing is not a test of strength. It's not something where you should ever be forcing your, someone's arm or your finger down or whatever. Like, it's not that kind of test. So she was making me have the results that she wanted me to have, probably because of, one, her ego, and two, she probably didn't want to get fired because she had mixed me up with a patient. It wasn't me. So then I said, I would really only feel comfortable proceeding with treatment for these supposed food sensitivities if you get someone who hasn't seen my results or those results to muscle test me. So she went and got someone else to muscle test me. And I don't know if she saw my results or not, because she took that file with her when she went to get the other person. But the other person got different results. Some of them were the same, but it was just stuff like, brown rice. Like, I would think that most people would muscle test poorly to that. But so she got different results. So the point is, muscle testing is not subjective. Any practitioner that's trying to tell, or muscle testing is not objective, it's subjective. So any practitioner that's trying to tell you that muscle testing is objective or that it should be used as the only line of evidence for diagnosing, or if it should be used for diagnosing at all, that practitioner is someone that you should run from. They're not being a good steward of the science. So I had several really bad experiences with muscle testing. And I do feel like I should tell you that later on, I figured out who they mixed me up with. I proved that they had mixed me up with a patient and that those were not my test results, and that technician was trying to make me give results that didn't belong to me. So, I had someone the other day call muscle testing quackery, and I felt compelled to make a video explaining muscle testing a little bit better, because anything can be quackery if you're practicing it incorrectly. Western medicine can be quackery. That technician who was trying to force my arm down so that she didn't get fired for mixing up my patient file, that was quackery, but the difference between quackery and a legitimate tool in your healing journey is whether or not you understand and honor the limitations. So you have to know what muscle testing is and what muscle testing isn't. But once you understand those things, you'll see that muscle testing is a really valuable tool for most people's self-healing journey. Now, if you think that it's total BS, it's not for you. Good luck guessing what you should eat or take, But if you're open to it, then you can actually find out some really interesting things about yourself and about your environment and about maybe why you haven't been able to heal yet. So anyway, this video was way longer than I thought it was gonna be, but I'm gonna try to save it so that I can post it other places, because I think I said a lot of what I wanted to say in this one video. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope you'll have a really awesome Saturday. You guys are amazing. Y'all are my friends, my mentors, and my students, just like my research mentor used to say. Anyway, bye y'all.